Our next presentation deals with sales planning and the trade spend management process. We have two speakers, Kaiser, Business Development Lead Americas for UpClear, and Rajeev Prabhakar, Client Services Director Americas for UpClear. Kurt, the podium is yours.
Thank you, John. I'm going to kick off today and just start by telling you a little bit about UpClear. Rajeev and I are with UpClear. We are a global revenue management software company. We serve brands both here in the United States and around the globe. And we provide solutions in the three areas you see in the colored boxes. Pricing, terms, and promotions is our core capability, and that's really a lot of what you're going to hear about today in sales planning and trade management. And then on the wings, you see integrated business planning and analytics and insights. So starting out, sales planning, trade management, there's a ton of stuff going on here, from annual strategic planning to account plans, executing, settling trade spending, and analyzing performance. So where we want to start today is with two really, really basic, simple definitions of what we're going to cover. Sales planning, we're defining today as the business processes performed by sales teams to plan and execute sales to customers. And trade management, the business processes performed by sales, once again, to manage pricing, promotion, and other expenses with customers. And we also want to just specify what we're not covering. We'll call these adjacent categories. They're related, there's a lot of touch points, but these functions are not going to be the focus of today's presentation. And what we're going to do is we're going to boil those 30-plus categories down into these 6 topics: performance measurement, strategy, account planning, settlement, accrual and spend control, and volume forecasting. And as we go through the session today, we're going to use a really simple 1, 2, 3 scale to categorize what you should expect in these categories. And we're doing this because we know that there's a lot of different companies of a lot of different sizes that are represented today, different functions as well. And some of you are big dogs and others are little dogs. And you don't all have the same level of people on your team. You don't have the same data, you don't have the same tools, etc. So as we go through this and you see the 1, 2, 3 ratings or categories, if you're a little dog, your current state is likely to be in the 1 to 2 range. And if you're a big dog, you're more likely to be between what we're going to show you as the capabilities and what you should expect in stages 2.0 and 3.0. So for some of you, the things we talk about today are going to be more of a checklist. And for others, we hope that you're able to take away kind of a roadmap of how you can advance your capabilities. All right, and we're going to do a quick question before we get into this. The 6 categories that we talked about. As we start, we'd like to know what you think your biggest opportunity area might be. And then at the end, we're going to come back to this and see if opinions have changed or not. So take a moment and select an area. And as we're waiting for results to come in, give it 5 more seconds. Okay, close the poll. Right, and strategy looks to be the key area. we'll give you some things to think about as we go into there. Volume forecasting, performance measurement, and account planning, close second. Okay, first topic, performance measurement. So in performance measurement, things are pretty clear cut. In the 1.0 stage, small companies, emerging brands, a lot of times the focus is just volume. Get the distribution, and that's what your objective is. As we move to the 2.0 range, most companies are then creating objectives, setting targets for both volume and spending both at an absolute dollar amount and spending rates. But as we move to 3.0, things start to change. And I'm going to welcome my colleague Rajeev into the conversation. And in this 3.0 world, brands evolve to measuring performance in terms of net sales or profit. So Rajeev, why is this evolution important, and what are some of the drivers as companies move to these metrics?
Sure, thank you. The key with performance management is really understanding what the goals are and providing a clear path on how you get there. When you look at a building of volume as your starting point, everyone aligns and understands what that is, but what it takes to get to that volume can often be counterproductive to your ultimate goal as a business and trying to get to those profit targets. So working towards that goal of driving to efficient spend really shows up when you get to not just a spending control, but a net sales target. And ideally, you get to profit. And when you get to that level of performance control and objectives, you can provide better guidance on, well, should we be running these kinds of events, for example, or not? Or are these price points really beneficial for you as a manufacturer, as well as trying to find those win-wins with the retailers.
All right, and lastly, for each of these categories, we're going to share a point of view on what we see most frequently when we're working with companies. Hopefully this provides kind of a rudimentary measuring stick that you can use to assess your company's capabilities. So Rajeev, what do you see in this area of performance management?
Yeah, I mean, everyone is pretty lined up probably with volume being a focus, and spending comes pretty close behind in terms of staying on top of that, especially as you become more focused around trade. Probably the one area that we see is not the focus as much for most manufacturers is profit, right? We're starting to see net sales being a good objective for folks and lining up there, especially in that 3.0 stage. But profit is still often closely guarded, managed internally, not necessarily distributed to the broader organization for targets yet.
All right, moving on to the topic of strategy. This was an important one for everybody. So again, pretty simple in the 1.0 world. A lot of times that annual planning process is simply, in the sales world, is just filling out the promotion spreadsheet for next year. It's trying to get at least the amount of frequency that you got last year and repeating that. As we move to and Rajeev, I'm sorry. As we move to 2.0, we see the adoption of a top-down strategic planning process being much more common. In 2.0, we see a lot more cross-functional agreement on objectives. We see insights being driving decisions, albeit in a rudimentary fashion and mostly based on internal metrics, internal data. And then finally, in terms of establishing guidance for your sales teams, we see the emergence of distribution, pricing, and promotion guidelines. So what products should I distribute in what channel? What price point should they be at? Sometimes there's targets to competitive products in terms of what kind of gap is acceptable. And then on the promotion front, you see guidelines on frequency of promotion, depth of discount, as well as the type of mix of promotions that are being sought. In the 3.0 world, that strategy work becomes much more collaborative between field sales and headquarters. You see a much more detailed bottom-up plan meeting the top-down objectives, and there tends to be a much more complete analysis of last year's initiatives. So we talked about those guidelines. So oftentimes those guidelines are then met with what actually happened. What kind of performance did I get on the promotion front? So Rajeev, this is the kind of example that we see put together for that 3.0 advanced strategic planning. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we all have a sense of what we want people to do, and we put that out there as a guidelines. We talk about it in our national sales meetings and say, okay, here's our targets, here's what we're trying to accomplish, and here's how we want you to get there, so that you're not just running off the rails with spending or price. But it's harder then to turn that around and say, okay, but did we achieve our goals? So we've seen a couple of examples of this where this works well. So in this example, we're looking at one retailer. We're saying within that retailer, how often are you on promotion, right? So your everyday price, you can see that in the blue, and the yellow is this is how many weeks you're on promo, and not just that, but what are your margins, right? Are you getting to where you want to be overall? And what is it taking to get to that level of spending and pricing with your retailer? Now, on the next slide, if you look at this across your customers, then you could say, okay, for an individual promo pack group or PPG, how are we faring? When we look across the different go-to-market strategies, this could be by channel, it could be by strategic versus not strategic customers, and you can start to see where you're falling within the number of weeks on promo or on deal at these different price points, and is that what you expect? Is this lining up with your guidelines and your goals? And so when you layer this into your profit or net sales goals, or whatever they may be, you can start to justify or evaluate if, like, okay, we're not hitting our targets, and this is probably one of the reasons why. So these are good examples of how you get there and how you can not just build a strategy, but then measure that strategy and keep track of it as you're moving forward.
Okay, and then as we move forward in this 3.0 world, that analysis of what happened last year also can be augmented with deeper insights enabled by advanced reporting tools. So this is where the idea of AI comes into play. I saw a question come in about AI, and in this sense, what we're talking about is the use of statistical modeling to help us more deeply understand that sales number and break it down into more finite pieces. And then the other way that AI or modeling comes into play is in planning tools. So not only can you use reporting to look backwards, but you can also use tools that will predict the outcome of new initiatives. So Rajeev, tell us about decomposition a little bit.
Yeah. So when you think about then achieving your goals, let's say you start fine-tuning that, you may not realize that there could be some bleeding around the edges that are undermining your ability to achieve your goals. So in this little example here, those green bars on top are your uplift and your lift and what you're trying to get to with this six-pack juice, for example. But you're bringing it down by cannibalization, right? And so you can get a little bit of tunnel vision if you start to just look at one aspect of the business and not evaluate where you are across the other pieces that could start providing more drag on just your growth overall. And this is where we see that next level of evaluating your strategy and seeing if you're achieving the objectives you want.
Rajeev, we just had a question come in for you. Should retailers' category, profit, and sales objectives also be incorporated within the scorecard? What weight should they be given?
Sure, yeah. So I definitely promote bringing in your retailer and finding where they are and what their objectives are and aligning it with yours as much as possible, right? That win-win, it leads you to overall growth together, building the category, building the business overall, and that's beneficial. Now, one of the things that I would balance is sometimes some retailers do not line up with your business strategy, right? It could be your brand strategy, it could be your objectives for growth within a specific market or segment, and so keeping an eye on it and understanding it so that you understand where you line up, but then also identify where, you know what, that's okay. We're not going to line up exactly, and that might mean we may not have all the assortment that we expect, or we might not get the display placement, but we're staying profitable in the way we want to with that retailer. Did I answer the second part of that question? I don't know if I did.
What weight should they be given?
Yeah. So, I mean, it really lines up to that question of, for that particular retailer, how aligned are they with your strategy? And for those retailers where you do align well, and it lines up with that brand, it's not just, it may not be the same across all of your brands and business. That might become a bigger objective for the sales manager or the team leader. But then in a channel or market where it doesn't make sense, then you diminish it, right? And this gets into the piece of more overall compensation and bonus structures, which we're not really getting into, but that's the kind of the end result here is how do you motivate people? And you got to be careful that you don't demotivate them, that you push a retailer win-win too much. And if it conflicts too much with your internal strategy that you're not going to be able to get there, then you might lose some efficacy just with your sales activation overall.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, and then just to wrap up strategy, Rajeev, what are we seeing most in the market? Yeah,
I mean, what's interesting here is everyone's doing some kind of bottom-up plan and just making sure you're getting your plans overall year over year. In the 2.0 stage, the getting to insights and using that to drive your decisions is probably the least common item here. And with 3.0, we're really not seeing a consistent pattern across all of these different aspects of strategic initiatives. The closest is probably the collaborative top-down, bottom-up approach. But even that, it's hit or miss. We're still seeing people having a internal corporate number that's being driven one way, but then doesn't get pushed down enough so that the bottom up actually makes sense to meet halfway. And there's a lot of opportunity here to build that whole muscle in 3.0 for the industry at large.
All right, moving on to account planning. 1.0, very, very transactionally focused. Teams are just doing what they need to do to get the promotions executed. And the inputs and output to this are simple forecasts. So generally what we're seeing captured are just the basic tactics that are being used, the timing, what products are involved. And Rajeev, we've got a real quick example here of what that looks like.
Exactly. Everyone should have a list of their promotions and know what kind of volume those promotions are going to drive and what the cost is to get there, right? This could be, people have this in spreadsheets, and then, of course, in trade systems, this should be bread and butter.
As we move to the 2.0 world, a layer of governance is added, and there's also tends to be a drive for efficiency. So at this point, distribution has grown. The number of people involved in the process has increased. The number of transactions has also increased. So you're dealing with more customers, and that means more pricing conditions, more deductions. So there tends to be a drive towards standardizations. And then another thing that we see in 2.0 is the creation of a total sales forecast instead of just potentially just focusing on promoted volume.
Yeah, and just expanding that out further to just say, here's all of your, not just what your plans are, but looking holistically and be able to see the full year, not just as individual events and those promoted volume and costs, but the managing the full plan so that you can bring that to life and manage that accordingly and not just be piecemealing it.
And then finally, in the 2.0 world, you're bound to see much more detailed planning in terms of the tactics that are being used, the customers that are being the customers with which promotions are taking place, and what may have been email approvals get a lot more structured.
Yeah, so now we're starting to pull it all together. You have your volume plan, you have your promotions, but you're starting to see how that impacts your margins. That can be both your internal margins as well as your retailer margins, so you can see that win-win. You're keeping track of not just the total dollar cost, but like what is the actual deal structure that you have, and that volume becomes more interactive, right? So as it rises up and downs with actuals, it actually drives what's happening with your promotional plan, so that you can stay on top of it and react accordingly.
All right, and then in 3.0, we see that drive for effectiveness. And in the 3.0 world, what was probably just a total volume forecast becomes a base and incremental forecast. And two big drivers behind that. One is that data becomes available. So you have external data sources like syndicated data from Nielsen or IRI, and the actual sales get reported in base incremental. But the other is that in order to, there tends to be a desire to understand ROI. And when you want to understand ROI, you have to plan incrementality, which means that you have to plan in a base incremental structure. We talked about like the customer element of this, so it's also where we will see the incorporation of customer profit into the planning process and use in negotiations, and that looks a little like this.
Yeah, so it's now taking that promotion and starting to expand it out and thinking more holistically about what is the impact of that event. Are you seeing, once again, the profits that you want to hit, not just the price points and the costs. And by getting to base and incremental, that's really where you can start to do a proper ROI. You can do some basic KPIs around spending without it, but it's not going to be as rich and informative until you get to a incremental model. Yeah,
and there's a question in the chat about TPR. Does TPR run in tandem with display? Does display run in tandem with TPR? And this can be the case, and it might not. I think your best bet is that when you do plan a promotion, if you have it on display and there's a price reduction, that you do plan it that way, so you're capturing both the display tactic and the TPR tactic that are going to generate promoted volume for you. All right, and then finally, in the 3.0 world, that's where we start to see a lot of emphasis on post-event analysis and optimized plans.
Yeah, and so So we're not just looking at individual promotions now. You expand it out, and you can start to look across all of your customers, all of your promotions, and all the SKUs that are part of that. And where are you getting the ROI holistically? So providing or being able to see that and looking at that in a big picture is also what's going to help now, not just say, are you making the right decision for this one event, but then are you making the right decision overall to meet your objectives that you're trying to get to? And yeah,
right.
in terms of what we're seeing here, yeah, sorry, I'll just run through it. I know we're want to keep an eye on the clock here. You know, everyone's doing some kind of basic plan and understanding what the promotion is and what the promoted forecast is. We're on the 2.0 side, the governance and efficiency and standardization is not always there. But we are seeing good traction with total sales forecast, some detailed spending and approvals overall. When we think about 3.0, base and incremental ROI, definitely something that is becoming a standard and something that we're seeing consistently, as well as taking that and doing that post-event analysis. However, effectiveness, incorporating customer metrics, and optimizing those plans, it's hit or miss. We're seeing that in some cases, but it's still not the standard.
All right. So settlement, moving on to settlement. So 1.0, essentially the deductions come in on the customer remittance and they get categorized with a reason code, right? And then you go through the very rudimentary process of validating or disputing and disputing the invalids. As we move to 2.0, we start to see deductions actually reconciled to approved promotions. So instead of just validating, you're kind of connecting them. You're associating actual deductions to planned and approved promotions. And what that does is it creates actual spending that's associated with the event, but then also it creates actual spending for customers, products, and the promotions.
Yeah, and this is often the entry point for a lot of manufacturers with tools and systems is just let's get a handle on our spending. So being able to take that amount that comes in on that deduction, match it to specific promotions so you can see where you're at. And then also if there's non-trade activity to see that as well so that you can see the big picture is critical. And part of what you may see and what you may find is this is where you start to see where you're overspending potentially, like in this example where that outstanding amount on that first promotion is over 12,000 now, but that's the reality, and that's part of what you want to capture is the real world spend.
Okay, and then in the 3.0 world, cross customer deduction analysis, streamlined backup acquisition, and processing those backups and automated matching.
Yeah. Getting lost in the trees here is a common thing, right? So being able to take a step back and seeing the forest and understanding where you're at may show you some areas where you didn't realize that there's some opportunities. So having a dashboard that gives you the big picture, where are you, who's driving your biggest outstanding balance? Maybe there's a long tail there that you didn't even realize that systems and analytics can start to drive some insight to show you where you may have some bleeding of your trade spending and settlements that are less efficient. And when you think about this, as I said, it's often a non-trade point. Settlements is pretty well covered. People are really aligned to this. Probably the biggest opportunity here is, and really when we think about 3.0, is bringing in that backup and making it more automated, as well as automating the matching once you have that detail. A lot of that is dependent on retailers actually wanting to play fairly. There was that whole blockchain concept, and that's kind of still out there, but I don't think that's taken off. But the idea of getting to an agreement that everyone sticks to and you can line up and there's no question about what the settlement is probably the next stage of where we're headed.
All right, and then quickly, accruals and spend control. 1.0 world, finance just forecast trade accrual based on a run rate. And you manage direct customers to a trade rate. And it's usually a trade rate that's the same across all products. 2.0 and
Yeah.
Rajeev.
Yeah, no, so just being able to see where your trade spend is and what kind of rates you have against the revenue is key, right? Just having that visual and seeing like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't realize I was going hot in spending in August or in January with Kroger. Does that make sense for what your overall plan is as you're looking at tracking spending throughout the year?
In the 2.0 world, as data becomes integrated, as that planning process and inputs, outputs become more standard, that plan from the sales team is used to help finance forecast that accrual. And in some cases, we see trade rates begin to get differentiated because of the different profitability by product.
Yeah, this becomes like, okay, where are we with our spending, right? So you plan a certain amount and then you have your payments coming in. So being able to see that across customers and start to collaborate on that remaining amount and that balance is a big part of what this 2.0 stage looks like.
All right, and then as we move to the 3.0 world, what starts to become more clear is not only what you're spending at direct customers, but also at indirects. So the retailers that purchase from distributors. The other thing that really refines the forecast is that instead of just a planned spending, you're able to blend together actuals that have already been booked and estimates for the rest of the year to refine that accrual. And in some cases, the loop gets completely closed to finance, and the accrual generation process is automated.
Yeah, finance and sales are often talking different languages and have different focuses. But if you start to bring them together, you'll start to see better results overall. So having visibility to how you're booking and closing the month and what your remaining balance is, your running balance is on your accrual, and making it clear to sales that they are driving that, they're a part of that solution, helps everyone make sure you land on that aircraft carrier in the middle of the sea at the end of the year with the right amount of money left that makes sense. And just another example of, in this area, finance is definitely a big part of and driver of trade spend and why people are focused on systems. We see a lot of groundwork done here that people are working with. Probably the differentiation of trade rates, or at least measuring in that on the 2.0 side, and make sure you understand what that is not as consistent. It's happening, but it's not necessarily planned that way. And then that closed loop feedback of the GL is we haven't seen enough of that traction. It's still somewhat different worlds, and if more of that happens, I think you'll see this area become a little bit more robust overall.
All right, and last area, volume forecasting. So 1.0 world, in a lot of cases, the sales team is just simply sharing their promotion schedule with demand planning, and demand planning is independently managing the demand plan.
Yeah, so bare minimum, similar to seeing that promotion list of costs and what you're spending and when it is, being able to see your volume impact of your promotion. So what you see here are just different events with different products and when they're going to hit with the different volumes over time. Just having that as a starting point of communication will make your supply more effective.
In the 2.0 world, and this kind of connects back to the account planning, those account plans, they create a total sales forecast by not only estimating promotion sales, right, but also the non-promoted sales. So you get a total that can be shared with demand planning. And sales then independently produces their call, and that's informed by these more robust account plans.
Yeah, so instead of just that point in time, you have an event, you have this activity and understand what's happening, understanding how sales is thinking about the year holistically with the volume plan, and as far out as you can, is where we're seeing this 2.0 stage where people need to be.
Right, and in the 3.0 world is where we see integrated, what we define as integrated business planning, and that's a high level of collaboration between sales and demand planning. So there are cases where the demand planning forecast is integrated right into the sales planning tools, and vice versa. The sales forecast is then directly integrated with demand planning. To augment this, that sales call process gets augmented with tools that just help them do the job quicker and more efficiently.
Yeah, so getting out of different spreadsheets and different calls, but providing one framework for consensus is key at this stage. And you're not just talking about the promotion volume, but you're also talking about any other impacts on category, distribution, pricing, competition, whatever it might be, that are going to contribute to any volume changes over time and fluctuations is critical. And that's an example of something that we've seen work well here. And so another area that volume forecasting and making sure that you don't have out of stocks and that's not your problem is a big focus for in all of these different areas. Probably where we're seeing a little bit more opportunity is in the 3.0, where the demand planning forecast and the sales call are more integrated. The consensus is happening, but having a more combined one view of the world is still not as common.
Okay, so we've gone through our 6 topic areas, but we also indicated we'd share some ideas on strategies if you aren't where you want to be. And to start that discussion, I'd like you to consider this. A new hammer does not equal an awesome deck. So whether you're in 1.0, 2.0, or 3.0, successfully activating these capabilities, it requires a good foundation. In this case, it's a lot of work around data, careful planning, resources, and skill sets. And let's start by talking about that foundation.
Yeah, so data is, people often, we talk to a lot of manufacturers about like, hey, this is where I want to be. I want a one-button push to optimize everything. And the first question I have is, how's your data? Where are you with data? And it could be everything from scope of completeness in terms of shipments, consumption, syndicated data, as well as quality of data. And as that increases, we start to see your ability increase in terms of getting to that 3.0 stage. But something to always consider as you're progressing into tools is you're building the pipes and the infrastructure, but if you don't have the water and data to flow through it, you're not going to receive the results that you expect.
Okay, and with regard to planning, our advice is to acknowledge that you aren't going to be able to do everything at once, and you've got to take time to decide what you're going to do less of and what business processes you're going to prioritize. And finally, whether you're 1.0, 2.0, or 3.0, there are some proven ways to help determine that prioritization.
Yeah, we recommend just checking in and treating trade and your sales planning strategy just like everything else, your product and brand and where you want to be. Have a 3-year plan. Assess where you're at. Identify how you fit in your framework of versus the industry. Where are your strengths and opportunities? And then come up with a roadmap. And the roadmap is process and tools, as well as people to figure out, like, okay, where do we want to be with trade? And then you see, okay, where are our gaps? What technology do we need to get you there?
All right, so as we wrap up today, let's revisit our poll question. Once again, take a minute and log in here what your biggest opportunity area is, and we're interested to see if anything's changed. and strategy still at the top of the list. And I think our assessment of that whole category showed that there is still a lot of opportunity in strategy work. So so that's going to wrap it up for us. Just want to thank you for sitting in on today's session, and just want to leave you with the thought that this whole area of trade planning, trade management, it's a marathon. It's not a dash, and we wish you luck with that long distance run that you're in. Thank you very much, and John, back to you.
Sure. Thank you, Kurt. We have a few questions here. One, on deductions, do your customers have success disputing deductions?
It's a mixed bag, for sure. It really depends on the retailer, for one, but then it helps if you have some weight behind you, whether you're an influential brand or you have some category management or leadership there. But overall, it's definitely the biggest opportunity area. And the one thing that does help most consistently is having a aligned approach and reference point, as well as the data to back it up on here's why we don't agree with what that amount is. It's very, in the end, where I've seen the most success is really, do you have the people to stay in the ring long enough with the retailers as they keep throwing things at you with deductions and things that might not be valid.
Okay.
And I'll add to that. Just reiterating what Rajeev said about having an upfront understanding of what the rules are, and then furthermore, the faster that you're able to identify and dispute these deductions, the more luck you're going to have recovering invalids.
Excellent. Okay, next question, Kurt and Rajeev. We have gaps to fill in a lot of these areas. Where should we start?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of where we identified going through an assessment, right? So we recommend taking stock of where you are, because you may think you have gaps, but you may actually be okay in certain areas and maybe worse off in other areas where you don't think is as big of a gap. And then evaluating what your goals are against that, right? So start to prioritize and say, well, you know what, we thought our biggest gap was around strategy, for example, and we're just not putting out the right strategy and doing the right analysis. But the problem is less about that as much as your account planning doesn't have enough data or rigor in it to be able to even do an analysis to figure out what your strategy should be. So that assessment is a good way to figure that out and identify, well, where do you begin in this journey and marathon, as Kurt had mentioned.
Okay, final question. How long does it take to get to the 3.0 level?
Depends how your lungs are, I guess, in the end.
Okay.
It is a marathon, and really, I mean, I've been looking at this for a long time, and take something as what some people think are very basic for 3.0 or should be standard, like basic and incremental. There's still a lot of very mature, seasoned, robust companies out there that are not doing it that way. They're still looking at total volume, for example, or yes, I'm on promo or I'm not. So for me, I always have the perspective that just get to better, right? So to 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, I mean, whatever you want to call it, just wherever you are, get to that next better place. And that is more useful than trying to say, oh yeah, I think I'm here and I want to jump right to 3.0. Because there's a lot of people that say, oh great, AI, awesome, let me throw that in and that'll fix everything. I'll become 3.0 just like the other big dogs out there. And that's not necessarily the case, especially when you think about all the things it takes to get to that. So take it stepwise, get to that next step and stage, and get to a better spot.
Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you both, Rajeev and Kurt. That was excellent. If anyone in the audience has further questions, you can reach out to Rajeev and Kurt. Their email addresses are on the screen right now. Excellent information, very good, very complete. Thank you both, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.